question from the group was, you mentioned last week about giving plant fats as part of the last meal, as part of the meal. Does this mean after his last meal to wait an hour and give him some fat, or since I feed him 3 times a day, give him the fat instead of his regular meal as the last meal? Can I mix the fats too, like avocado, coconut meat, and nut butters? Also, for nut butters, I noticed most places where you can put the nuts through the machine are all roasted. Is that okay? I would maybe give him almond butter. Well, I've seen those. You've probably seen those nut butter making machines in the health food stores. I don't think they're as popular as they used to be. Unfortunately, because they're probably better. In fact, they are better. To have people making their own nut butter, even if it is cooked. But she says, okay, she would give him almond butter. Well, for my feedback on that, I'm not huge on feeding nut butters in the first place. It's kind of interesting to me that they seem to be acceptable to people who claim to feed strictly what wild dogs have access to, because I'm pretty sure that wild dogs don't have food processors. But at the very least, the nut butters should definitely be raw. And I'm open to feeding nut butters. If you feed nut butters and you see a dog gaining weight that wasn't gaining weight before, and you don't see any other problems, I think it's perfectly fine. But like I was saying, the nut butters should be raw, except for peanut butter. Raw peanuts do not make butter. I don't think you could even make peanut butter out of raw peanuts. But every other, because peanuts really aren't nuts at all. They are legumes. But like almonds should definitely be raw, because nut butters go rancid at room temperature within like a week or two. And typically what you find in stores is probably months old. And don't be intimidated by the idea of making your own raw almond butter, because it is super easy to make if you have a food processor. All you do is dump in a cup or 2, depending on how big your food processor is, and you just process them until it becomes butter. You just leave it, let it go. You might have to scrape the sides down a few times, let it go, and it becomes butter. It's fantastic. And by the way, I wanted to mention, in case anybody here is interested in truly raw almonds, I do have some. I sell them. I buy them from a farmer every year. I don't do it as a business or anything, but I buy some for my own personal use, and I buy extra for some of the people around here in my local area who like raw almonds, because I don't know if you're aware, but about 15 years ago, the almond industry decided that all almonds destined for the commercial market would be pasteurized. And they do this using either chemicals or steam. So, I buy almonds directly from the farmer, and I know that they are truly raw. And anybody who's interested in buying some, I probably have, 15 or 20 pounds that I could part with. So you can message me if you were interested in that, or comment on the YouTube video if you like. But to get back to the question, because fats are already pretty hard to digest, and also since wild dogs don't have a lot of access to them, there's really no historical precedent for mixing them together. So I wouldn't mix them together. I would either replace a meal with avocado. So feed a whole, this is a small dog, by the way, that I happen to know. And you could offer a whole meal of avocado. Remember, I shared a couple weeks ago the study that observed all the animals that came around to eat avocados from an avocado grove, and many of them were carnivores, and they just ate their fill of avocados. So they're obviously, and that included coyotes. So anyway, avocados are definitely fair game. Or, if you can replace the whole meal with avocados, or just a mono meal, or give an afternoon snack of fresh coconut or nut butter as the last meal of the day. Okay, the next question is pretty short. Regarding fruit, can you please clarify what dates you're referring to regarding fruit meals? As far as I'm aware, the only dates available are dried with a high sugar content. At least those are the ones available in South Africa. Are you referring to fresh dates? And my answer is no, I'm not referring to fresh dates because those are really hard to find. And in fact, I've not even seen them for a long time in a store. And the only time I have ever seen them is in the Asian stores. And I did buy some once, probably about 15 years ago, just to try them. And they're not very good and they're pretty dense. So I would not feed them to a dog at all anyway, even if you could get fresh ones, unless the ones that I tried were not representative of what they really are usually. I don't know. But when I talk about dates, I'm referring to the brown shriveled ones that can be found in any grocery store. And it's probably the same thing that you are looking at down in South Africa. Some of the varieties are the medules, and Kadrawis are the ones that I usually buy, but there's a million different varieties. The moister, the better. You just want to look for the moisture ones. But here's the thing, they do have a very high sugar content. And for that reason, I'm not a huge fan of dates. It's not that there's anything wrong with fruit sugar. Fruit sugar is extremely healthy. But I just don't like, I don't find much that favors feeding a food that has been deliberately left on the tree until it's shriveled. And that's what they do with dates. That's what date farmers do. They just leave them on the tree until they're completely shriveled up and the sugars are super concentrated. And that's really no different from taking a fresh fruit and putting it in your dehydrator until it shrivels up. And I don't really like feeding dehydrated foods to dogs. The water that's in food is important for humans and for dogs. So